Hello everyone, with us today, Nikhil from Marathon Law. How are you doing? That was a good clap.
I'm good. I'm good. I'm doing well. Good to be back.
Yes, so today what I want to touch base on is foreclosures, what is going on in the market. Everybody's been talking about that. You being a lawyer, just from your perspective, what is actually going on, right? Because from the news feeds and from social media and from everywhere else, people are getting different teasers from different angles. But what is actually happening in the market that you can see right now?
Yeah, I mean, like the market's definitely in a place where there's a lot of negative stuff happening. Unfortunately, we are seeing a lot of people unfortunately encounter power sales. So there's a lot of individuals who are selling their properties for losses or selling just enough to cover the mortgages that are outstanding on the properties. So there are a lot of individuals who kind of over leverage themselves or took on a mortgage that they couldn't afford. So people are essentially letting go of their properties for losses or breaking even. I wouldn't say that's the case in every scenario,
Of course,
but it's definitely becoming a lot more common now.
So the effect, was it the effect from, I would say, the last half a decade, or since we had that turmoil with all that shutdowns and whatnot? Was it from that era, or is it like, people taking on too much from 10 years ago and now it's catching up?
I think it's a mix of many things. One being that a lot of people unfortunately over leverage themselves.
Right.
So they pulled out equity out of their properties because the values had gone up significantly due to low interest rates.
Of course, yes.
So some people, they took out equity out of their properties to buy other investment properties, whether it was pre-construction, whether it was renovating their properties, whether it was buying a car. So people pulled out a lot of equity out of their homes. You also have a lot of other individuals who pulled out equity out of multiple homes, so their primary residences, their investment properties. Some used it towards buying more properties. So everyone thought that the good times would continue rolling on, where rates would remain low, but obviously the equity of their properties has gone down the last couple of months because rates have gone up. So it's a mix of many things, but the biggest thing that we've seen is people pulling out equity out of their properties. And what you're seeing now is people pulling out equity out of their properties to cover their first mortgages. So we're seeing a lot of individuals also taking second mortgages on their properties. So there's a lot of factors, and it's one thing where there's a lot of fear in the market as well. So yeah, no, we're definitely an interesting market right now, to say the least.
So look, I mean, like knowing what I knew then, what I know today, all these scenarios and situations, at points in our market, in the last few years, we had situations where, a fear of missing out, you know what I mean? Like, because inventory was low, lack of inventory, everybody was kind of struggling to get to their next top-up property or to buy an investment property.
Yeah.
As you're saying, because they were hoping that, this is never going to stop. Like,
Correct.
Right? And yes, in some cases, if we look at some stats from the media and whatnot, they did claim that some of these interest rates will remain lower for a long period of time, right? So it is what it is now. We are here where we are, but what happens, for example, in a scenario where you have sellers that cannot afford and they have to sell, and they're over leveraged but they cannot sell.
So
You know what I mean? Like,
it just depends, right? So if a seller is over leveraged and they have enough equity in their properties to obviously pay off their mortgages, they're gonna do the best.
Right now.
Yeah, they're gonna pay off their mortgages, they're gonna pay off their realtor's commission, they're gonna pay off their legal fees. But at the end of the day, if someone's selling where they have multiple mortgages against their property, those mortgages obviously have per diem interest on them when you go to pay them out. Sometimes people miscalculate how much money they need to actually pay out these mortgages because there's these prepayment penalties, essentially to break your mortgage early on. So let's say someone has multiple mortgages, let's say hypothetically a first and a second. So if they haven't done the math correctly, they actually may need to bring money in because they haven't taken into account out-of-pocket expenses such as commissions, legal fees, maybe outstanding property taxes that they haven't paid. So we're seeing quite a few sellers going to sell their properties, and they have these other expenses that they didn't take into account for. And this used to happen before
Of
the
course,
market as well,
always.
but it's becoming more prevalent now in the market. So people are definitely taking losses. Some people are selling, they have enough equity in their property when the market's taking a downturn, where they bought years ago, 30, 40 years ago. So they're obviously selling for lower what they would have sold during the peak of the market,
Right.
but they're still walking with equity. So yeah, you're definitely seeing people take hits in the market. And I can say the same thing for pre-construction, right? People are also walking away from pre-construction right now because they can't afford to close because the rates are so high, or they're just not getting that appraised value back for what they bought for.
So you touched on pre-con, right? So when it comes to pre-construction projects, right, like from what I can see, some of the projects are being either delayed or they just went under.
Yeah.
Like they just went bankrupt or they couldn't finish. Some of the projects, because it's a big commitment, right? Like if you go, 50 stories high, 80 stories high, like you have to finish that particular complex or project, right? So it's a big commitment, right? But what happens if someone is in a position where they say, okay, look, I gave that particular down payment, and now I know I will not be able to close, okay, period, or take occupancy of that particular condo or whatever it might be. What happens between the actual builder developer and that buyer that purchased? Are there obviously consequences, but what's the best scenario and what's kind of the worst?
Yeah. So people that bought pre-construction, for example, a couple of years back and they're closing now, let's say the property values, which is becoming very common, have gone down from what they actually bought the property for.
Right.
So that's an option that they kind of try to exercise, where they choose not to close, whether it's during interim occupancy, so if they're buying a condominium, or final occupancy. So some people are literally saying, we don't want to do interim occupancy because we can't afford the interim occupancy fees, and we're not going to be in a position to essentially close this property
Sure.
when it's final occupancy. So what some people do is they tell the builder, we're just going to walk away and we're going to forfeit our deposit. So hypothetically, let's say you're in a scenario where someone's given, I don't know, let's say $100,000 to
Sure.
the builder. So you're essentially losing that $100,000 because you're walking away from this transaction. The builder has to mitigate their loss. That's why they're taking a deposit. But if the property has gone down significantly, where the $100,000 is not enough to cover the loss that builder suffered, they'll sue you for the rest. So let's say in this situation, the builder sells for, I don't know, $1 million. They bought it for 1.2, the buyer. The builder's kind of mitigated their loss by keeping the $100,000. What about the rest of the money? What's the other loss?
Yes.
So they'll go after, well, they have the option to actually go after the buyer for that loss. Will they? Well, they're going to do the math. They're going to see whether or not it's worth their legal fees, whether it's worth the time, or whether it just makes sense for them to relist the property, keep the deposit, and maybe break even or make some money on top, whatever it is. So they do have the option, if they've taken a loss, to sue the buyer, which may happen because property values have obviously gone down. Will they continue to go down? Nobody knows at the end of the day, right?
I mean, nobody knows. I mean, what we kind of see in the current market, it doesn't look promising. Did we reach the bottom? I don't know, right? Like, I mean, I'm trading every day. But I do see that people that list their properties correctly, and when I say correctly, I want to say for the current market value, not the market value that they think it's the market value, right? So if the due diligence is done properly, and if the property has been listed properly within that threshold of market value, I still think that there are buyers out there that will entertain those
for sure.
properties, right?
For sure.
But, I also see the other side of the spectrum, and, sellers are, calculating their math sense, right? And they say, I need this X number for me to walk out with no loss.
Correct, yeah.
So I think those days are gone, because I don't think that they will be able to calculate the X number and walk out with the loss, depending obviously on the situation. But the question is here, do most developers or builders actually go? Like, have you ever heard scenarios where the developers or the builders, they say, no, we're going after you for the difference because that particular down payment, it doesn't do justice. It's not enough.
Definitely, more so now than ever, only because, as I mentioned, the prices have gone down. So it may have been less common a couple of years back,
Sure.
but developers are beginning to go after buyers who are walking away from pre-construction, more so than ever actually, because again, prices have gone down. Usually what they do is they'll give you a default letter where they'll give you time to correct your default or close on the property, whether it's getting financing in order.
Penalties in between?
So they can actually charge you legal fees. They can charge you, for example, interest on their mortgages, whatever out-of-pocket expenses they've incurred as a result of the buyer's breach.
Sure.
So normally they just want you to try to close it. So they'll give you some time to close the property, maybe a week, 2 weeks, depending on the builder. If you can't, then they'll send you another letter saying that you're still in breach. We're going to exercise all remedies available to us, which is they have the option to sue you. So we are seeing it now. We've seen a couple of default letters come in. We've seen a couple of claims get issued as well. Whereas if you look at it a couple of years ago, the builder might say, hey, you know what, we can just relist the property and recoup our losses. So yes, we are definitely seeing that now.
Yeah, but I mean, like the situation, like if you are developer, a builder, right, of pre-con, and then based on the portfolio, if a lot of these units are coming back, some you didn't sell in between and whatnot, like it's a not comfortable situation for these people either, right? Like,
Yeah.
Because money is money. Like they might carry
Oh yeah, they have
mortgages, expenses and whatnot, right? Just because you cannot close and other 100 people in the same building, what am I going to do with all the inventory? I have to still sell it,
Yeah.
right? So adds more stress, right?
I think if there's a way for the builders to still make profit and they have enough margin, which I know a lot of builders do, and some builders have actually been flexible on closing some properties that buyers bought in the last couple of years. So personally, we haven't seen it, but I've heard stories of builders decreasing the prices on their units. Then it's a win-win for everybody. The buyer can close, their appraisal comes back, accurately,
Sure.
and the builder still makes money because they do have those margins available to them. So that's the best case scenario, I think, in this market.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, look, I believe that also, developers and the builders and these buyers, they all want to come to the table and try to find a solution, right? Rather than going into the second or the third round,
Yeah.
because nobody knows. I also, the word that I hear on the street, right? Like, so whether these people are hating or not hating or whatever the case is, but, they say, hey, look, nobody forced them to buy 4 units, deal with it, you know what I mean? So, I guess it's just like a business decision for different people at different times and different situations. But the difference now between these foreclosures and customers or people that bought these units, is there any scale that you might have in your head? Like, is it more happening in Toronto core, or is it more happening outside the city, or is it just like mix and match, it's just everywhere? Or?
Yeah, so people that are having to sell their properties because lenders are enforcing on them. We're seeing a mix of different cities, not just the GTA, we're seeing a lot of rural areas as well, because those areas outside the GTA have been impacted pretty significantly. So I wouldn't say just specifically the GTA, we're seeing it in all areas.
So it's everywhere.
Everywhere.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Wherever there's real estate, there's a problem.
Correct.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. It's happening everywhere. We do see quite a few in the GTA, but we're seeing a lot of areas in outside the GTA where a lot of private lenders lend. So where Schedule A banks or Schedule B banks may not have gone and go out to get second mortgages. There was not enough equity in those properties. Privates were a lot more aggressive the last couple of years,
yes.
But privates are also a lot more aggressive when it comes to enforcement. So majority of the enforcement that we're seeing with privates, I would say, is outside the GTA.
So what does that mean? Like these private lenders, do they have more, let me call it rules, or like when they lend you money, is there like are they enforcing some of these schedules in the agreement so that they can take the possession of the properties quicker? Like,
So
what is that?
generally, the way that it works is if somebody needs to close quickly,
Sure.
or they can't go to a Schedule A or Schedule B bank, they'll go private, obviously. But
Yeah.
private lenders normally charge you interest only, so there's nothing really going towards your principal. So if you can't find a way to refinance or sell that property, because when people usually go into privates, they have an exit strategy. Buy it, renovate it,
Yeah.
flip it, or buy it, refinance it, bring on a Schedule A or
Find a
something like
solution
that.
quickly.
Yeah, there should always be an exit strategy when it comes to privates. But a lot of people don't have that option or don't have an exit strategy because whatever their exit strategy was before they went into the private may not exist anymore. Refinancing it, well, the value's gone down, so how are you going to refinance it? So now the private obviously has less equity in it because when they lent on it, there may have been more equity on it. Same thing if they decide to sell it, they may have thought that, okay, we'll put some money in, or we'll just sit on it and we'll eventually sell it and the property values begin to go up. But if the property values have gone down, your private might be so significant where there's literally no equity left in the property. So a lot of privates are obviously forcing now because people can't afford the privates, or private lenders may not renew.
So what happens? I mean, like in these agreements, is it common for a private lender to say if you default for whatever case, like whatever it's in the agreement, that they take part possession or the entire possession of the property, or do they go on title, or what?
I think for the most part, so just, backing up a little bit, most private lenders are willing to work with the borrowers.
Sure.
They're willing to wait to see whether or not they can refinance. If they can they sell the property? Because they also want to get their money out of the day.
Of course, 100%.
So a lot of reputable private lenders are willing to either renew, wait. Obviously, they're going to add on their fees and their interest to the payout statement, but they may not immediately enforce. But if they go to enforce on the property, obviously what they're going to try to do is they're going to try to get something called writ of possession. Once they have a writ of possession, they'll sell the property. But again, kind of backing up a little bit, what's the difference between someone who's trying to sell the property, who has the private on registered as a mortgage, and the private who's selling in the open market? Both want to get rid of the property, both want to get equity out of the property. So a lot of private lenders, they want the seller to find an exit strategy so they can get their money back. Because don't forget, that costs the private lender a lot of money too, because they have to hire a lawyer, they have to issue a power of sale against the property, and that's going to cost them time and money.
But they're entitled to
100%. I mean, yeah. So like, if someone literally took a private on a property, and there was a mutual understanding, they understood the terms of the private, there was complete transparency. Both sides had lawyers representing their interests. They knew what they were getting themselves into. Then at the end of the day, there's it's a fair transaction. So the private also needs to be protected because they lent their money out to this borrower who needed it at that time. So
what's, I mean, like nobody really knows what the solution is at this point, but like in July, which we are in right now, Bank of Canada will discuss the next step when it comes to rate cuts or not cuts,
Yeah.
whatever.
hopefully cuts.
Hopefully cuts, right? So we'll see. Let me know what you think on that. Like, I will have a video talking about the bank rate cuts on my channel to follow that particular segment. But for now, Nick, I want to thank you.
Thank you.
You've been always welcoming. You're a gentleman. You do your job right. Marital law, we dealt before. Everything was flawless. So if you want to find the gentleman, he's at Marital Law right here in Richmond Hill.
Vaughn.
Oh, sorry, Vaughn. So Vaughn.
It's okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Vaughn, in Vaughn. Okay, so Marital Law in Vaughn. You also have one in Port Credit, no?
We have a satellite office in
A
Port
satellite
Credit.
office in Port Credit. So please like, share, and subscribe, and see you all next time.
Thank you.